And the next speaker is Deputy Thomas Pringle.
And I welcome the opportunity to contribute to this debate this evening. But I think, like other speakers, I have to question the actual timing of the introduction of this legislation, where it actually comes in down to the wire. As I understand it, we have 2 years to transcribe European directives into primary legislation or international legislation, and I fail to see why it takes 1 year, 360 days or 363 days to actually get it to the floor of the House. Like, I mean, it doesn't make much sense, and it doesn't allow for the proper scrutiny that should be envisaged for legislation such as this, and particularly for something as important and potentially damaging as a major incident would be in relation to oil and gas extraction. You know, if there was a major incident, it could take 20 years, 30 years for our shoreline to recover. The environmental damage could be huge, and so I think that legislation like this should be given the proper time to actually be scrutinised and looked at as well. I think the legislation is fairly complicated going through it, and and then the definition between operator and owner, and then a petroleum entity or whatever as well. There's layers of different responsibilities there that should all be teased out, and ultimately I think whether you're an operator or an owner or a petroleum entity, you should all have equal responsibility in relation to safety and the operation of wells. And I know the directive itself says that the operator as a person should always be the entity with primary responsibility for the safety of operations and should be at all times competent in that regard. But surely the owner who's contracting the operator should be to make sure that the operator is competent as well. I know that CER and this legislation have the role in seeing and deciding whether operators are competent and can ask them to refuse an operator. But that's the other part. In Section 7 of the legislation says that an operator has to be approved by the minister, but I don't see it saying in conjunction with CER or based on consultation with CER or anything like that, if they're the people that are examining the safety records and examining the safety reports and stuff like that. So is it possible that the minister could approve an operator without referring to CER that there, and so could you have operators that are in there without the proper scrutiny and responsibility? So there are things that I think that just need to be clarified a wee bit as well in relation to it. And I would agree as well with John Deputy Brown when he was speaking there in relation to the fines for non-compliance with the safety statements. When you look at that, the exploration and development of a site might cost maybe up to €1 billion to develop a site, and then for failing to report an incident, you get the maximum fine of €3 million. It's actually peanuts in terms of the financial impact that it would have on the operators, and I don't see a deterrent there in the level of fine and the level of being, if they're caught out and sanctioned in relation to some operations that they're carrying out that might lead to safety and might lead to major incidents. And as well as that, one of the things I know that in the legislation, SARE will actually review the safety plans of the operators and the owners and look at how they might work and get them to simulate how their response would be in relation to any incidents or possible incidents. And that I'm just wondering about the state and how SARE's role in relation to how the state would actually respond in relation to a major incident too, because if there was a major oil spill offshore, there would have to be a state response as well, and the state would have to step up to the mark. While it's right that the operators should be responsible and they should carry the liability, in a really serious and major incident, the state would have a role to play as well. And I'm just wondering whether there's any role for SARE and actually looking to see how prepared the state is, because I think that would be very interesting to see just actually how prepared the state would be in dealing with a significant incidents and significant events that might take place offshore or that. Other than that, I think the legislation obviously has to be transcribed into law anyway, and so it will go through the House and won't be objected to. But again, I think we should be seriously looking. I know it's not only your department, Minister, that runs it down to the wire in terms of transcribing legislation, but I mean it's something when you have 2 years to do it, you know what's happening, so it should be something that should be able to come in a timely fashion. Thanks.
So now I call on the Minister.